All right, welcome to the Startup Genome Global Webinar Series. Today, our topic is focused on globally branding your startup ecosystem with a subsector focus and the metrics that matter. Thank you so much for joining us. Today, our agenda is going to include a short round of introductions. We'll go into the metrics that matter and our methodology. We'll round it out with insights from the Global Startup Ecosystem Report on both Cleantech and Life Sciences recent editions. We'll cover our editorial plan, and then we'll open things up for a Q&A following at the end. And so just a quick overview of our webinar series, so you can get a good sense of what you're doing here today and other things that'll be coming in the future. Our webinar series is very purpose-driven. We highlight specific and tangible topics for startup ecosystems focused on acceleration. And typically it's a mix of Startup Genome and our partners. We'd love your feedback on what you'd like to hear more of, whether it's policy or programmatic. Let us know by emailing adam@startupgenome.com. Some previous topics we've covered is using a cloud-based data platform to track and support your startup ecosystem, and also multiplying ecosystem growth and policy impact through a data-driven assessment. All of those are available actually on our YouTube channel, so you can catch things that you might have missed in the past. We always update our webinar page with upcoming future topics, so feel free to address that here. And we'll be following up with this deck as well, so you'll have all of these links at your fingertips. Today, these are going to be our presenters. Hello, my name is Trish Naik. I'm the Chief Operations Officer here at Startup Genome, and I'm based at Atlanta. I'd also love to introduce my colleagues. We have Hazel Boydell on the call. She's the Editor-in-Chief of Startup Genome and based in Lisbon. Welcome, Hazel.
Hi. Hello.
Hi, and we also have Farshad Fahimi. He's our Director of Data Strategy, of course, also at Startup Genome, and he's based in Berlin. Hey, Farshad. Awesome. So great to have you all with us. I'm going to go through just a very high level of who Startup Genome is and a bit of our mission, so you have a good sense of who you're speaking with today. What we do is we accelerate the growth of startup ecosystems as an economic engine through proven policies rooted in practice. We take a very data-driven approach. The reason behind this is that the success of startup ecosystems should not depend on the region, the gender, the ethnicity, or social background of founders. Right? We're looking to democratize the opportunity within startups, and in doing so, spreading the genome of thriving ecosystems everywhere. We have an incredibly extensive global network. Our network is made up of governments, public and private innovation agencies, and innovation centers. And why is this important, right? So we're looking at this from the lens of an economic growth driver, and positioning your ecosystem globally helps to achieve that, right? So working with us helps to support you in your efforts to develop your ecosystem into a globally leading startup community, right? Utilizing the programs and policies that you are enacting as examples of what other ecosystems can do. It also helps to develop an even stronger global ecosystem identity. This is important because it's necessary in attracting investment, startups, corporates, and talents into your ecosystem. And lastly, it's to connect you, right? Connect you to global hubs and to support your efforts to reach a more international audience. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Farshad, who's going to walk us through the metrics that matter and our methodology.
Thank you, Trish. I want to take a few minutes to go over the metrics that matter and also our methodology for the GSER. How did this come into being? It's important to know that we worked over 10 years with 50,000 founders and executives, and we developed the methodology for assessing your ecosystem and assessing the startups. We also worked with 100 governments, innovation centers, and private entities, and we have formulated the metrics that matter. The Startup Genome is a team of experienced investors, founders, corporate executives, and public policy leaders. And we spoke to them, we interviewed them in order to find out what are the specific metrics that they want to see in order to be able to quickly and clearly evaluate an ecosystem. A couple of definitions. One is a startup. What is a startup? It's a technology innovative business that is less than 10 years old, unless it has scaled up over 100 million or it has reached the Series B round, where we take also any company after 1995. A startup ecosystem is around the central point of a city, 100 kilometers radius, and all the innovation that is happening in this region. Why we are choosing this 100 kilometers is because it is the distance that people are usually willing to travel. And for the time frame of analysis of this year's GSER, what we are taking is the second half of 2019 until the end of 2021, unless we have longer term metrics, which is 10 years until the end of 2021. Our methodology is built based on 6 main factors. It's performance, which is mainly the ecosystem value, how big is the size of your ecosystem. It's the exits, which is showing how many exits you're reaching in your ecosystem and how much is the growth of these exits, which are bringing the money back into the investors in order to be able to invest again. Funding is showing the earliest stage innovation inside the ecosystem. Market reach is showing how many globally leading companies are going outside their ecosystem and reaching new customers or going to a new market. Connectedness is partly local connectedness and partly global connectedness. It shows how the founders are connected to other cities around the world. Experience and talent is showing in 10 years how the talent has been growing, how the cost of running a business has been growing or declining, and also is showing the activity of investors and the scale-ups over 10 years. The knowledge factor is the patent and research, and it is showing how much the knowledge, especially in deep tech sector, has been growing inside your ecosystem. Performance, I brought 2 main factors here. So the exits and the speed to IPO, which are showing how long does it take for a startup to get an IPO, and also how many scale-ups and billion-dollar exits your startups have. In funding, we have earlier stage funding growth and the activity of investors by total active investors and the average years of experience of VCs in an ecosystem. In connectedness, what we do is we use the meetup data, we use the meetup events in order to get an understanding of how the events are happening, if it's increasing or declining inside an ecosystem. In market reach, we are taking the scale-ups as a measure to see if they're globally leading companies inside your ecosystem. Talent is showing the number of GitHub coders, number of developers, as well as the activity of the universities and the quality of universities inside your ecosystem. And last but not least, experience is showing 10 years measure of the earliest stage growth inside an ecosystem, as well as count of exits, the big exits, the scaling experience inside your ecosystem. And as I said, we have the patent growth and knowledge, which is showing how much of the deep tech sector has been growing and the innovation has been happening inside an ecosystem. The H index is showing how much of the journal papers, publications are being cited, and what is the quality of these citations? What is the impact factor of the journals that you're going to? I want to close this section, and I would like to hand it over to Hazel, my colleague, for the next section.
Thank you, Farshad. Okay, let's take a look at the Cleantech report. The Cleantech report is a look at the cleantech sector, and it was released in January 2022 with support from the Entrepreneurship for Climate group. Within the report, we have the ranking of the top 25 global cleantech ecosystems around the world, regional top performance in cleantech, analysis and key findings, which we'll take a closer look at in a moment, key ecosystem players, including the incubators and accelerators in the cleantech space, as well as angel and VC investors, and exclusive insights from thought leaders in the cleantech space. So this is a series of long-form articles from experts who know about cleantech. So in jumping into our first slide, you can see here that Series A investment has been in decline since 2019. Part of the reason for this is the COVID-19 pandemic. Like many other things, it disrupted investment. So we can see that it temporarily accelerated investment into subsectors that were highly relevant to pandemic challenges, such as life sciences, and that resulted in a delayed investment in subsectors that were less relevant, which you can see here, both in terms of deal count and dollar amount. However, Series B plus investment remained more steady. You can see that from 2020 to 21, there's a little bit of an increase in amount, and the deal count is largely steady. There's some increase in 2021. Momentum has been returning to cleantech since the disruption from the pandemic. In the second quarter of 2021, the number of Series B plus rounds in this subsector reached an all-time high of 32, which is a 77% increase from the same quarter in 2020. Continuing to look at these later stage deals, you can see that the total amount invested in Asia and cleantech surpassed the amount invested in both Europe and North America in 2020. Although the number of deals and exits in cleantech in Asia is still a fraction of the number in Europe, China has recently poured huge amounts into a small number of very large deals, particularly in the electric vehicle subsector. So that's something we're keeping an eye on. You can see here that the exit amount has increased dramatically. The number of cleantech exits fell to a 5-year low of 100 in 2020, but the total exit amount in terms of dollars significantly increased from 7.7 billion in 2016 up to 29.5 billion in 2020. And this was due in part to several multi-billion dollar exits in Chinese EV companies again. Although the amount has declined from 2020 to 2021, it still remains well above the amount of the period 2016 to 2019. So going into the rest of the report, we have a series of long-form pieces from a number of thought leaders in this space. You can see here we have Matt Toner, who is from the BC Green Party in Canada, Franz Noto, founder of Climate Launchpad, Bianca Dragomir, who works with the Valencia Cleantech Cluster, Patrick Garnier, the CEO of EcoFuel, and Fred Walty, the founder and former CEO of a Cleantech incubator. So all of these people bring unique insights to the report. They are experts in their field, and we encourage you to go to the website and take a look at those articles. So let's take a look at how the report looks on our website. So here you'll see on the left, there's a full table of contents, but let's just take a look at some of those key insights. As we mentioned, the report does rank the top ecosystems around the world. We found that the top 5 cleantech ecosystems are Silicon Valley, Tel Aviv, Stockholm, London, and Los Angeles. Notably, this is the first time that Stockholm has entered the top 5, and the first time that Tel Aviv has ranked this highly since 2012. North America and Europe dominate the top 25 cleantech ecosystems with 44 and 40% respectively. Asia has 2 ecosystems in the top 25, and MENA and Oceania have 1 each. One of the key findings that we already touched upon is that in the second quarter of 2021, we saw 77% growth in the number of Series B plus deals compared to the same quarter in 2020, which is an all-time high. We also found that Asia saw a decline in Series A deals in recent years, but it recorded a 2 times increase in total late-stage investments from Series B onwards in 2020, from 1.17 billion in 2019 to 2.47 billion in 2020. As we mentioned, this is driven in part by several huge investments in electric vehicle companies. We also found a post-money valuation of cleantech companies increased by 23% in 2020 and 176% in 2021. Cleantech companies have the highest exit transaction of any subsector, with an average company taking 3.8 years to reach Series A and 5.5 years to reach Series B, which is almost 8 months and 11 months longer than the tech startups across sectors. And if you are curious about those other sectors, please do take a look at our other reports on the website. Going back to the table of contents here, you can see on the left, we have some support from Entrepreneurship for Climate, Foresight Canada, and Innovate BC, and then a series of long-form articles. We can see here the rankings. This is the global top 25. Some of those key findings that we already took a look at. Some of the key trends there. And then we can take a look at one or two of the articles. So this is from Matt Toner, who works for Shred Capital, formerly of BC Green Party, talking about the elusive political entrepreneur and how you could recognize one. So I do encourage you to take a deeper look at the website. We also have some other subsector reports looking at fintech. Quite soon we'll have agtech up there too.
All right, thank you so much, Hazel. That was incredibly enlightening on Cleantech. Now we go to life sciences with Prashad.
Thank you, Trish. So let's take a look at what the life sciences report was all about and what happened in 2020. We published this report last year in 2021, and we analyzed the data until 2020. It's because we wanted to take the latest trend, but also make sure that we don't deal with any of the data lag that this industry is offering. And I want to start this by saying that what we are bringing in this report, you see the top 20 global life sciences ecosystem and the next 20. And we see the top 5 regional performance in life sciences, the global subsector insights, life sciences analysis and key findings, key ecosystem players, and top incubators and accelerators in this field, top angel and VC investors, and the ecosystem pages. So let's take a look at some of the insights that we have. We want to look at the global subsectors and what happened in 2020. In gaming, is a mature sector still. It's still growing, but it's huge and it's growing much slower. The cybersecurity is hot, but there are not so many exits, and more investment are going into new innovation and new startups. Cleantech, what's happening now wasn't there 2 or 3 years ago, and now it's growing. In earlier stage funding, new innovation happening, and it's interesting. EdTech has seen a decline before COVID, and now it is required more than ever to come up with new innovation and new ways of learning. And the other subsectors, we have AI, AMR, blockchain, as always, as highest growing sectors, and exit and earlier stage funding is growing and new startups are appearing. And in the blockchain space, we see the rapid growth from 2017 to 2020. It's the first appearance of crypto variants and exchange markets and the applications of crypto and smart contracts. In fintech also, we see a growth, especially in a very mature sector, and especially in 2020 in the lending and insurance. Let's take a closer look at the life sciences and what happened. You see that while the other subsectors have flattened, we see a growth in 2019, 2020, especially in the Series A investment, in the earlier stage investment. So basically, a closer look at the Series A funding in life sciences, it shows that the other mature subsectors until 2019, and has seen a growth away from the rest of the pack since 2020. There's been more and more money flowing into life sciences. Life sciences is much bigger. The shape of life science evolution and funding needs are different. And in 2020 especially, we've seen that the funding and amount of investments in this sector has been growing. Investors are also chasing for better deals which means that the good deals are scarce and investors are focusing on higher quality rounds. The overall market is competitive and investors are putting more money in. Doesn't mean the risk of investment is becoming less. But the investors that are experienced are getting in earlier and getting cheaper deals due to their network. This has given them better intelligence over the startup landscape, which gives them an advantage to other players. Total Series B plus funding in life sciences in 2020 was nearly two times that of 2019 at over $19 billion. 2020 also saw the highest increase in the number of unicorns since 2016. There were 10 more unicorns that have already been created in the first half of 2021. There's a huge growth in unicorns. In 2021 and 2020, investors held to their good investments and added follow-up rounds. This year was about keeping and expanding on their quality investments in their portfolio so that they can satisfy the ROI requirements. Various software startups decided to maximize growth through the VC fundings, and they were consolidating their efforts in these volatile markets. The top performers of life sciences are North America with 50%, having the top 40 ecosystems. Europe follows closely after at 25%, followed by Asia at 20%. MENA and Oceania are growing and have one top performing life sciences ecosystem each for the first time. That is Tel Aviv and Melbourne. The exit values of life science companies has been increasing nearly in all regions, with North America and Europe on top, and Asia seeing the highest exit amounts for the first time, majorly taken by China. Let's take a look at the report and see how it looks on our website. We have the key insights from the report, which is showing us who are the main contributors to this year's top ecosystems in the life sciences report. We see that the Silicon Valley, Boston, New York City, and London are again the top ones, followed by San Diego. We know that the North America and Europe dominated the top 25 life sciences ecosystems with 48% and 24% of the top 25 respectively, followed by Asia for the first time, 20%, and MENA and Oceania with one ecosystem each for the first time in top 25. 49% of the unicorns between 2015 and 2020 were created in the top 5 ecosystems. There are now 108 life sciences unicorns globally, with 34 companies achieving unicorn status the first half of 2021 alone. And in 2020, global life sciences exits totaled a whopping $96 billion, double the value of 2019. We also brought in Launchwick as our partner this year, which helped us in producing this report. And we have for the first time also an infogram, which is summarizing the main points in the report. So you see the top 25 here, and also the ecosystems to watch, the ones that are growing in this field. You see the Series A investment growth, and you see how many of these companies actually achieve the unicorn status. And some more infographics that you can also see here in terms of Series B plus, life sciences exits, and the average deal size in Series A, which has been growing in this market. Thank you for tuning in. Now I'll pass it over to Trish.
All right, thanks so much, Farshad. Extremely exciting to see what's going on in life sciences, and also to Hazel for walking us through Cleantech. So now I'm going to take us through the editorial plan so you can get a good sense of what Startup Genome is cooking up over this year in terms of outcomes. Of course, you're familiar with the GSER, the Global Startup Ecosystem Report. This is going to be exactly 10 years, actually, since we started this effort for GSER 2022. I've got a mock-up of the cover here. Similar to previous years, we're going to have kind of really the bread and butter of the report, which we know that our readership and journalists alike are interested in. So those types of things are the ranking of global top ecosystems, exclusive articles from thought leaders, and then, of course, analysis of global database trends. Within the last 2 years, we have broken out our deep analysis of subsectors and made them their own reports. Of course, what Hazel and Farshad just spoke to. We've got a lot of those coming down the pipe as well. Cleantech, of course, just came out in January 2020. The next one that we're working on currently is ag tech and new food. And this year, we're also planning to hit cybersecurity, AI and BD, life sciences, and industry 4.0. And then in early of 2023, we'll be covering educational technology as well. So you can tell there's a lot that we have cooking up, and we're also very curious to hear from you as a part of the Q&A. Now, what are other subsectors that you are interested in that you would like to see a deep dive with data about? So going back to the GSER, right now we are slated for a June launch, and we have a lot of different plans that we're making to make this report better than ever. What's going to be new this year is an expanded Startup Founders Corner. Those are the contributed content focused on founders. So it'll be some founders that will be sharing their growth stories, but then also folks like VCs and head of accelerators that can share their tidbits and knowledge to help startups in their journey of growth. Of course, these captivating articles and expert insights will be included within the report. We are also year over year increasing our coverage of Latin America and Africa ecosystems. Of course, this is a global report, and it's incredibly important to us that the footprint reflects that. We also are focused on translations. This will be the first year we're planning on translating the report into a few different languages. We'll be releasing those soon. And as a part of this, of course, looking to expand our global audience as well, and our global audience of media that, of course, that is non-English speaking media. And then lastly, this year, we're going to be bringing in a PR firm to help with very high-level global placements on global findings. We have seen significant growth year over year in terms of citations from media and academics citing this report. We hope to double it again in 2022 and are looking forward to working with an external firm to help us to achieve that goal. We also have ecosystem page changes. So within the report, of course, we have high-level articles that cover data science-focused findings. We also have articles that are contributed from experts in the field, and we have ecosystem pages that are wholly focused on one ecosystem. This gives readers a great sense of a deep dive, really, into what's going on in that ecosystem. Now we have a variety of different data metrics that are shared. We've got kind of overviews in terms of which subsectors are strongest within those ecosystems, along with reasons to move, really as a way to captivate a startup audience that might be looking to move headquarters or to soft land in a new space. And so we are making additional changes to those pages as well, which are very exciting. We're going to be pretty much doubling the number of metrics on those pages. So even giving more insight from a data-focused lens on how that ecosystem is faring. We're including a new page on local key players that will be selected by our members for those that are members that have an ecosystem page. Of course, we also have rising ecosystems, and the top ecosystems have a page as well. But for those where we have members, this is where we're going to have a great overview of kind of those key people, those key events, those key programs, that folks should know about their ecosystem as a way to get more easily involved and have more access to the ecosystem. And lastly, we also have added a widget from Dealroom. So Dealroom is a strong partner of ours. They have amazing data, of course, on startups, and all of the kind of localized information from Dealroom will be pulled into those ecosystem pages as well. So definitely eager to see these new changes on the report this year and to get your feedback on other changes that you would like to see. Personally, the translations are the most exciting to me. I think that's going to be fabulous for us to expand our audience into multiple different regions that we haven't been able to touch as well before. I would like to touch on our audience and global reach. As we earlier went through in the presentation, you got to see that our membership network is incredibly large, but that translates well to our audience being very large. So Startup Genome's online presence, we're garnering about 350,000 unique readers, with the top countries listed below, mainly focused on the United States, India, Canada, and Germany. We also have an incredibly large monthly newsletter with 120,000 subscribers. Those subscribers are made up of all the different profiles you see here, including investors, foundations, academics and researchers, public and private innovation agencies, government policymakers, journalists, and ecosystem builders. And the lion's share of that monthly newsletter is made up of startup founders and startup leaders themselves. Several million readers also discover our research every year through those thousands of media citations that we garner. And then, of course, like anyone, we've got a social media presence where we also heavily hit all of the findings within our reports to a massive kind of global audience. All right, here you can see an example of an ecosystem article within the report. This example is focused on Melbourne's life sciences cluster. Of course, this ran in our bespoke life sciences subsector report. As you can see, we take kind of a holistic approach, right? We first initially talk broadly about the ecosystem, and then we want to highlight major players within that ecosystem and people, right? We want to make it feel accessible with human stories. So here you can see a quote and some feedback from Kate Cornick, the CEO of LaunchVic. And then also we have call outs on specific startups, like here, Smiley Scope, where our focus is telling the story of the startup's growth within the context of the ecosystem. We're very proud of these articles. We see this is a great way to connect your ecosystem with a larger audience in a way that a third party is talking about your success as opposed to you only talking about your success. Ecosystem articles like this are also heavily promoted within our different assets. We create, as you can see all the way to the left side of the screen, we create an amazing infographic that goes along with each launch, where our partners that produce these articles, work with us to produce these articles, are highlighted. Also highlighted here in the middle within our newsletter, and then of course on our social media presence. LinkedIn is our most heavily used social presence, and there's plugs there as well. Lastly, we do press releases and co-promotion kits for anyone who is involved in either the GSER or the subsector reports. We find that acting almost as a PR firm for our clients and our members are a way that they can have an incredibly tailored approach to reaching out to their local media. So a dedicated press release is created and sent on the international wire. The global release is sent to over 3,000 press contacts. And then we prepare our local partners to pitch their own local media as well. And that includes a full-on co-promotion kit, which includes, of course, the press release, also media pitch email templates, and then social and newsletter template copy as well. We take a very copy and paste approach. We want to make sure it's very easy for our clients and members to be able to share all the different findings that are highlighted within these reports. And even if you are not a paying member, right, if you are being highlighted within the GSER, whether it's a ranking or just an interesting chart where we're talking about your ecosystem, we highly encourage you to share your involvement in the report and those findings, right? It can be another kind of soapbox type fact that you can share with your broader audience of why your ecosystem is a great place for startups to build. I want to give you a couple of examples of folks that have worked with us and really where we've seen a nice influx of interest within their ecosystem. So here you can see mentions by year of Belgrade and Novi Sad. So we're taking a look at Serbia at the moment. And you can see these very nice spikes of when the GSER has come out and when these ecosystems have really seen a good influx of interest within their ecosystem. We've got a few examples here. Serbia is an incredibly strong one. We've worked closely with Seoul for quite a few years. You can see here, both in 2020 and 2021, especially huge spikes based on their involvement in the GSER. And lastly, Philadelphia in the US as well. So kind of the pre-startup genome time versus when they started working with us on their branding and how we've seen this really nice hockey stick type growth. So thank you to those three partners for being willing to share that as well. All right, and with that, we're going to open into a Q&A session. Of course, myself, Hazel, and Farshad are here at your disposal to ask any questions based on our methodology, any of the subsector reports that we've either recently covered or we have coming down the pipeline. And of course, if you have any particular questions on the GSER or how your ecosystem can be involved, this is a great time to ask this group. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Trish. Right. Thanks for attending the webinar. It was exciting to also have this with you. And I see already a couple of questions that I want to start with one of them. And it's especially from James. Thanks for asking this question. We have a question regarding the exits, and you've been asking if you only take the exits over 1 billion, or if you also take smaller exits and merger and acquisition. Yes, we do take all the merger and acquisition and IPOs in different metrics. We also take over 100 million, over 1 billion, 50 million, and also all of the exits in our performance metrics. And the reason we do this is some of our metrics is created to show how good an ecosystem is in scaling up. And some of the metrics are created in showing the performance. So the exit growth is also something that we use in the performance. And for that, we use all of the exits inside an ecosystem. So that's one of the questions. Trish, would you like to take one from your side?
Sure. Sorry, I want to unmute myself. That sounds great. One of the questions from the chat that's coming in is, what's the best way to get highlighted within one of our reports? Great question. I'll give you a bit of a quick but holistic approach. So the most comprehensive way to get involved is ecosystem branding membership, which is getting an ecosystem page, a full press launch, and then inclusion along not only with the GSER, but also into our subsector reports. There's also the possibility of just having a GSER article this year as well, or an article just in a subsector report. We've introduced these kind of article options as a lighter way for folks to get involved, especially between now and April 15th, when our deadline to choose to be in the article for the GSER is. So in short, there's a lot of different ways to work with Startup Genome, but to be a part of one of our reports, those are really the three main ways. Another question I see, and then I'll pass it back to you, Farshad, is what is the pricing for the press release and co-promotion? The press release and co-promotion is a kind of add-on or something that is, I should say, included within either purchasing the ecosystem branding membership or purchasing an article within one of our reports. The overall pricing to purchase an article within the GSER is $15,000 USD. We have some flexibility in that pricing, but typically we find that groups will have maybe ecosystems come together with 2 or 3 different partners. They split the cost. What's also great about doing that is that when you have a couple of different partners that are a part of the interview process for the article, we get a really interesting view of the ecosystem from a few different parties. And then we also have those parties at the ready to promote the findings within the press release, within the co-promotion kit. So in short, I hope that answers a couple of questions that flew in from the Q&A. Farshad, I'll pass it back to you for another data-centric question.
Yes. So regarding the data collection process that we have Sama. I think we can leave the email for you. We work with Deerroom at the moment to update your data. So we can put you in touch with somebody who is professional. They give you a data format specific for funding and exits and companies and events inside your ecosystem. And then you can pass it to Sama and they will update it for you. That's regarding, I think, the data that you ask on India ecosystems. One more question that I saw is very relevant and interesting is about connectivity and the connectedness. So we have been using in the past our survey. Our survey has several questions regarding local connectedness, which is asking the founders, how many times did you meet the founders inside your ecosystem? How many times did you meet investors? And we have questions regarding the global connectedness, which is asking how many contacts do you have in the main cities of Berlin, London, Paris, San Francisco, and main hubs of the startups. As you know, and as you mentioned also in one of the questions in the chat, it is important to some extent when you're located somewhere in the hub locations. But of course, it's your contacts also important because we consider also mentorship, connectedness as a very important factor. And so in the past we used survey, but now we are evaluating around 250 plus ecosystems. And for that reason, we also added Meetup. Currently, we are also in conversations with OEDC to also, they have developed their own talent methodology. So we see how is that gonna work out for our metrics and talents.
All right. Thank you, Farshad. I actually see that James has sent a couple of, James Miners has shared a couple of questions and just some feedback, which is interesting. James, I'll share this with the group. Some of the most valuable insights from previous reports to focus on deep tech as an important sector and investment hypothesis. We hear you on that. And the risk of premature scaling, the impact of multiple founders. From the first report. That's very good to hear, especially that you're focused specifically on deep tech. That's actually a reason why we took the subsector reports and really took a lot of that subsector findings out of the GSER. Starting in 2020, we pulled out all of the subsectors and have now focused on having subsector specific reports, right? So we can really get much deeper within a sector. So I'm glad that you're enjoying it so far. We are planning Industry 4.0. I'm sure we'll be covering lots of deep tech as well. I think a question that came in from James as well is one question you could mine from your existing data is founding teams as siblings or married partners, if they have a similar, greater or less success rate than non-related founders. That's fascinating. Actually, not something that has come top of mind recently. Farshad has an amazing blog post / column that he writes for Startup Genome, where he looks at different innovation, most recently battery innovation. He's looked at new meat, some really interesting topics. And maybe, James, this is one that we can cover on the blog in the meantime. And then we see, how well that content hits, and maybe we can include it in the GSER as well. So we're very open to anyone's feedback, specifically on topics that would be interesting. We are very much right now in the production phase of the report. And so we are finalizing contributors. We're kind of finalizing some themes based on the data that we are seeing. So very open to feedback, and really, our main audience in terms of numbers is really always going to be the founders, but we always want to directly talk to policymakers, leaders of innovation agencies, and folks at foundations, really the ones that are swaying these policy and programmatic decisions, like everyone on this phone call. So we are incredibly open to any suggestions you have on interesting themes. And James, that's a fabulous idea of something to look into. All right, let me see another question that we have in the chat. Can my government department work with our local chamber or innovation agency to partake? in either the branding membership or the articles. Yes, actually very similar to what I was just speaking to. An example, actually, one that we work with is in Tanzania. We work with both Startup Tanzania, the World Bank, and the CDC. And like I said earlier, this is a great opportunity to not only kind of spread the cost between a few different organizations, but also to work in concert on building a great narrative, whether that's for ecosystem branding or for putting an article together. And then also have really a team of different groups on the ground that are working to promote the findings at the time of launch. Like I talked about earlier, when we're getting to, local impact, getting out the narrative, the more we can promote in terms of social media, your own personal newsletter, one-to-one email, and then also approaching journalists directly within your kind of local and the national contacts is really the best way to get the news out about how well you're represented in the report and your highest level findings. All right, any other questions you see coming in for Shad? Let me see.
I see a very interesting question from, if I pronounce it correctly, Jeko. And I don't actually know the answer to this question. I need to get back to you. I'm just going to leave an email for you to be able to get in touch with us.
There we go. And the question is, how important is the presence of an active business angels network on a market in order to develop a viable startup ecosystem? Let's see what kind of data we can pull to answer that question. But yes, we'll follow up via email. Awesome. Thanks for Shad. Let's see, another one just came in on my side. Why did you take, and actually this is really more for you, for Shad, but I'll read it out for the group. Why did you take 100 kilometers as an ecosystem definition? And what is your criteria in taking a funding?
So the 100 kilometers came to existence because this is the distance that the investors and the funding team are willing to travel to meet each other. And the second question was, what is the definition of the funding, Trish, if I get it correctly?
Yes, that
So
is.
for the funding, the main criteria that we have is a company is tech and it's less than 10 years old. If it's a scaled up, of course, it can be more than 10 years old. If it's more than 100 million valuation. And this is the main criteria that we use. There is a smaller criteria, such as checking the companies are innovative and they don't fall into non-tech category. And that's all.
Okay. We try to keep it simple because when we're making apples to apples comparison across the world, we have to keep it simple. And of course, I know most of you are super familiar with our reports on the call, but of course, a big part of what we do is not only ranking, but benchmarking, right? And so that by having some of these, definitions, which give us clarity across the board, it's easier to kind of make those apple to apples comparisons. Okay, I see one more question coming in. Let's see, in your opinion, how long does it take to build an ecosystem brand? Okay, to be honest, it really varies from where you're starting, right? But typically what we see is that places that invest in it, and maybe they're starting, maybe like not exactly from scratch, but maybe not a ton of narrative building or not a lot of, PR type of work done. We see, within a couple of years, usually about 2 to 3 years, relationships can be made with local journalists, newsletter list in terms of size can start to be built based on, very progressive outreach. So it really, to be honest, it really does compare between those that have already put in some legwork and those that are starting from scratch. But it usually takes a couple of years. Working with a group like us can be helpful. Having a PR firm that you work with to help build narratives locally can be helpful. You can do that year round. There's a lot of different ways that you can really work to build your brand. And working with us is one way to do that. And we really enjoy kind of taking the different approaches based on the local findings and how we can highlight those and kind of jigsaw puzzle the facts to make it an incredibly interesting thing that a journalist would want to pick up. All right, I think that is all the questions that I see on my side. Am I missing anything for Shad, or should we let everybody kind of
I
get back
just want
to
to
their
say,
morning?
just one more last note. I see a question about premature scaling. This is also a topic that we are currently just working on, benchmarking some Asian ecosystems versus US ecosystems and London and Paris to see what is the effect of premature IPOs and if it affects any success or failure follow on. I don't know the answer right now, but we are working on this.
Okay. Oh, and we have one more question actually come in. With the world moving to move more hybrid and virtual to a more virtual environment, do you guys see a gap for virtual ecosystems, especially in Africa? That might be one that we need to crunch some data on to see. I do think kind of a short answer on this in terms of what we've seen trend wise is that COVID has become a bit of an equalizer, right? There's been a lot of digitization that's been happening because of COVID. And we're seeing that some ecosystems that have been kind of utilizing this new virtual landscape, the fact that talent can be anywhere, has really changed the game for a lot of ecosystems. And those that are taking advantage of this time are able to leapfrog past those that are not digitizing as close as possible or as fast as possible. Farshad, you have a few thoughts on this too?
There's a small spoiler also because it's coming for GSER too. What we are seeing is a trend of unicorns really distributing between countries. So if anything, this virtual movement of working from home, of course, it has increased the number of edtech companies and it has dispersed the unicorns from all the main ecosystems. So it might be a good thing. We have to see in 1 or 2 years. But for now, I think it has a positive effect.
Awesome. Okay, thank you everyone, especially those that left comments in Q&A. Of course, if you want to email us, you can also feel free to contact both Farshad and I. We're happy to answer your questions via email. If you particularly are interested in becoming a branding client or purchasing an article, really now is the time. Please feel free to reach out directly to me or Adam, who I know you've been in touch with and has been emailing. You have his email as well. But thank you all for your time today. I think we'll wrap that and get everyone back to their morning. Thank you so much for joining. And thank you, Farshad. This has been great to do this together.
Thanks, Trish.
Thanks all.